thing. So we started Forge, and that means like now I'm like fully focused on an app development, which is a pretty big shift for me. In Anvil, and for our audience, like I've primarily been working like DevOps, pipelines, infrastructure, and platform, like more of the systems engineering and enablement stuff. And what I'm rapidly realizing as I do this is that like I haven't done feature development in a long time, and it shows. It doesn't show like, I haven't touched any of the designs on Propeller, so it's not like it shows in like the ability to like UX or UI, but just in my ability to get into that headspace. Like it's definitely like a skill degradation. It's not a skill that I'm not even sure I have it anymore.
Yeah, and aside from skills, like you mentioned, like the headspace, you do have to be in a certain headspace for sure to think about building features, right? Most of us don't build an app from the ground up. When I say most of us, I mean like if you're joining a company,
Right.
for the most part, 90% of the time, you are not building or scaffolding the app from the ground up. You're usually starting with something that exists, and
Right.
you're typically, bolting on features or however you want to phrase that. But you definitely have to be in a headspace to do that. And there's times where I like float in and out of that. There's times where I love features, feature engineering, or being part of a product team, and you're like, okay, we own this product and we're gonna add on features and we're gonna make it better. And there's times where I really enjoy that, especially when I'm working with a team and with a product that's exciting and features that are exciting, like new challenges. And then there's times where I'm like, oh, I'm so sick of feature engineering. I'm so sick of being on a product team. So it definitely goes in and out, but yours is a little different. Yours is because you actually were doing a different kind of work, right?
Right. Yeah. So like, I sort of intentionally left feature engineering a little while back. Like I haven't been on a product development team in a minute. I mean, what I have done. I worked in a product team at USA, and then moved into learning and development and some of the infrastructure side of things. And then from there I went to Stored, and worked as their front end architect, and now I'm in product or in engineering productivity and developer experience. And so like I think like there was an intentional choice to get out of feature engineering because when I was doing it, I didn't really love it. But like you mentioned, like you go back and forth on it, and like I think that's been the big gap for me. I just remembered that I built a prototype, this, an MVP for an ed tech company, um, in the summer or in the winter of 2021, and that's probably the last time I was fully invested in product development. But yeah, it's because I've been, not because I'm not doing anything, but because I'm doing other work. I've been mostly focused on like tooling and systems enablement, which you could say, and I think some people do, and I sort of try to treat it this way, as like it is still like product engineering because you do have an audience and you're engineering for them. But I think it's fundamentally different because like, when I do systems engineering, like we're talking about like architecting systems and not just like I don't know, there's something to be said for like that ship it mindset.
Right.
And I think that that's really at the core. Like definitely, I cannot lie, the time frame constraints on people working directly in product engineering are much more stringent than anything that I've done in the last few years. Like I know that. Like you have a lot of time to think it through and like build these long roadmaps and sort of migrate the code base in a way. But like with product engineering, like you really have to focus on like deliver the feature, deliver the feature, deliver the feature.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. You're in like this a different role, more of like a leadership role. Or you've done architecture, and you still do that in a sense, but your title's a little different. But it doesn't matter. It's the same space. You help create roadmaps and epics and like these longer visions, right, of where the company's going to go, that kind of
Right.
thing. And when you're on a feature delivery team, on a product team, as an IC or even like as a senior IC, but you're still writing code, you're still in the mindset of, hey, we have to ship this.
Mm-hmm.
Whether there's a date out there that you need to meet, or it's like an arbitrary date maybe that can move, but you're still like moving towards something. The goal is that you ship it. The goal is that it gets out and you don't overanalyze it, get stuck in like analysis paralysis, or
Mm-hmm.
you try to build bigger than it needs to be, right? The idea is you ship small, ship often.
Right.
And you're absolutely right. Like it's something that you have to get used to. And even early career engineers might struggle with this. And I guess I say that because I struggled with it as an early career engineer. When I built something, I built the whole thing, right? And I didn't ship until the whole thing was done, very much like a waterfall approach.
Yeah.
And so when you're out of this environment, when you're like doing something else, maybe you're doing like DevOps, and you're not in a hurry to ship something. You're just like, hey, we're gonna improve the pipeline, right? There's no real
Right.
timeline on it or something like that.
Exactly.
Maybe I'm just gonna improve developer experience in some way. There's no real timeline. You don't have that same mentality of, hey, there's a product owner, there's some features that we want to deliver. We've got this team. Maybe we have QA, maybe we don't. Maybe we're the QA, and we have this team, and we want to improve the product through features on this roadmap that usually somebody else creates, right? That's kind of where you
Right.
live right now.
Exactly.
But you at this level down here, and I say down here because usually that's kind of how we look at it, are delivering features, are moving faster. And so, and we saw that with Forge, and we can see that with some of the stuff that
Yeah.
we were doing, right? I'm very much in the mindset of I just need to ship it, and if it breaks, we'll fix it. Now, that doesn't mean I want to ship garbage code. That doesn't mean I
Right.
want to ship something that's really flaky. I don't. But sometimes we do ship something to just test it, to see
Right.
if anybody even wants it, because the truth is you build all these massive worlds and then nobody wants it, and then you're like, man, I've just wasted. And you can kind of consider wasted other than the learning. There's some learnings that come from everything you build,
Right.
but other than that, if you don't get users, if nobody wants to use this thing that you built, it kind of does feel like a little bit of a failure, again, aside from the learnings.
Right.
Learnings can always take you into the next thing. And part of that is don't build so big, build smaller, build faster, iterate fast, right? Because it's the same thing with the stuff like we're building with Forge, right? That's the idea. We meet once weekly. We talk about the things. We have these milestones that we want to reach. We have, somewhere we want to be at the end of the 12 weeks. But the truth is, if we get like a couple weeks in and we say, you know what, this is not viable. Like nobody even wants to use this.
Yeah.
Then we can pivot. And as
Right.
opposed to we dedicated a whole 12 weeks to do this. And the way that you get there is that you ship early and you ship often, right? So we know that Propeller is out there in production. Wordwall went out early. And then I started to think about some things. We both did. Is this like, how do we capitalize off of this? Is there a monetization strategy? What does that look like? Does any, am I competitive? And you start to ask all these questions because now you started to think of it as more of, you have to start, as an
As a
engineer, like
product.
as a product, right? So as an engineer, and I tell this a lot to younger engineers, and this is one of the reasons that we're so passionate about like workshops and education is because I'm gonna make this assumption that a lot of early career engineers, they can only see what's directly in front of them and they can't see the big picture,
Right.
right? So hey, go change the color on this button. All right, awesome. And they don't really
I
know why. Maybe they're changing the button because there's a low conversion rate because that button is orange when maybe they want it to be blue or green, and blue or green signifies go do this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so as an early career engineer, we don't always think about those things, myself included. You make these decisions based on your preferences as opposed to what your market wants. And so again, anything that we do when we teach, we're always talking about how do we look at this from a bigger picture? How do we validate the market, right? So um, as part of Forge, one of the things we're doing is coaching.
Yeah, and I maybe wanna like the thing that I think I'm honing in on is that like it's not so bad. Like, okay, so you're talking about like early career engineers that just look at the like the world is kind of like constrained, right? And that what I want to like hone in on is that is a skill. And there are good times and bad times to be like that. And choosing the right time to be like small world versus universe is really the skill. Because like I'll tell you that I think my problem right now in feature development is the exact opposite. Is that I've spent so much time looking big picture
Yeah.
that it's really hard for me to narrow in on just change the button's color. Like I like every time I go to do something on Propeller, I'm like, how do I systematize this? Because like the whole process of my life right now is systematizing things, right? But like honestly, it doesn't matter Like I don't need to systematize it. I need to do this one thing for this one thing. And so like what I want to balance out, and like what we want to emphasize is that like these are skills. It's not bad to think small picture. It's not great to always think big picture. Like the real value is in knowing which picture to be looking at. And I think like what I'm saying this a little bit reflectively because like my time in product engineering with Forge, like just even 2 weeks, I'm realizing that I really struggle to look small picture anymore. And it's because it's a skill like I haven't got on that bike and rode at, because that's not what the day job has been, The day job has not been small picture. It's been big picture for years now. And I mean that's the thing that I also think is important. Is like it's important to know how to look big picture, and it's important to know how to look small picture, because the most important thing is knowing when to move between those two.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. Because I think sometimes I do look too much small picture. Um, and it's a really great skill, right? Like I think you just like hit the nail on the head there, is that being able to move between like when do I, build fast and maybe hold off on some things, right? And when do I need to think about big picture? So I think one thing that I would think about big picture is like user data,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like security. Security is something I wouldn't want to skimp on, right? And say, oh, let's just go fast and we'll just kind of skimp on some things,
Yeah, please
right? So
don't.
security will always come back to bite you. If you make it to where your user data can easily be intercepted, or stolen, that's always going to come back to bite you. But you can go small picture on other things, right? Like maybe we don't need this whole like page of text and information, so we can go small picture, go really small, and then see if people want more.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so there's different ways that we can, or different viewpoints, different lenses that we can look through things. And so I think this is a really great call and like a skill that people have to learn. Just another one of those skills that we can tack on to as an engineer. What do I need to learn? And it's really hard in the very beginning when you don't know these things. In the very beginning, you're simply like, and I guess I want to apologize. I'm always going back to like the early career engineers when that's a
Yeah,
fault
no,
of mine
no.
too. But um, I think that like myself, when I was, and part of this podcast is about like retrospective, right? Like looking
Right,
back and thinking
right.
about things that we could have done differently or things we would have known. And one of those for me was that, when I started writing or building apps, it was, what am I trying to deliver at the end of this? And I didn't take any outside feedback, not really. All everything, every single decision was mine, but it was all related to code, right? I didn't think big picture because I didn't know how to look big picture.
Yeah.
And so everything was small. Everything was like in this little world. And basically you get tunnel vision and you build this thing. And so there's times today where it's really good for me to get tunnel vision. It's really good for me to think small and say,
Mhm.
I just need to do this one thing. And so these are things that you learn again as an early career. You're just like, oh, how do I do this? How do I, create this variable? How do I create this array? How do I manipulate it? And it takes time to realize that there's more than just that little block of code. That little
Right.
block of code is just, a tiny little atom in the whole world that you're building.
Yeah.
And there's all these other things to consider. And usually these are things that you don't learn by yourself. Usually you kind of pick these up from other folks in the community that you're a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I remember, and you're aware of this. I don't know if we've talked about it too much, but like my very first like SaaS startup was really gritty. It was literally a Google form built on top of a Google sheet with some custom formulas. Like that was it when we built it, and then I slowly moved it over to like an actual app. But like I started really narrow world. We needed to capture some data and organize it. And then, over time, like you said, like people tell you like, hey, that's it's a terrible, terrible thing to run a startup on. And you're like, okay. And so, but sometimes you kind of get, oh, well, I definitely got like way too big picture, right? And like everything needs to sort of be pristine and systematized and kind of coming back to that. I think like one of the things that you honed in on though there is that like you learn them over time. And I think even as much as you learn them over time, you forget them over time if you don't practice. Because like I know you're talking a lot about early career engineers, and I think we both have a strong passion there. I don't know that I consider myself an early career engineer anymore. I used to kind of think of myself as like, I haven't been doing this very long, but I think now I probably can't say that anymore. And like, I struggle with a skill that, I mean, just really candidly, that like probably I shouldn't, but it's because I haven't practiced. And I that's what I want to hone in on, is that like, or another piece of this is like learning to practice those skills and to move between them, right? Like, and I want to say that that doesn't mean you need a job that has that skill. I recently, read this take um on LinkedIn, where everybody goes to post their opinions on jobs, where a prominent member of the developer community was talking about like how you have to practice your skills at work, because if you don't, you lose them. But like, I think that like, I mean, like, here we are, we're talking about me doing feature development, and not as a part of my day job, but as a part of like just my continued development via Forge. And you and I have talked a lot about like, engaging in lots and lots of parallel work to skill up. And I think that's an important part of this to call out, is that like, these skills, you learn them, and it's just as easy to lose them. And so you have to practice, you have to come back to them from time to time and remember like, what is it like to build a startup on Google Forms and Google Sheets again, and stuff like that, so that you have that mindset of ship it, and then to step back and also build some systems, build some like, try to, I love these whole build X from scratch sort of things, like build your own Git, build your own React, because like, you build something from the ground up and you really learn like that systems thinking. I probably did way too many of those mid-career though.
Yeah, I like that you called out about building something early, like you talked about like on Google Forms or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and you're right. You get to there's kind of like this mindset that I have about like opinions and how we grow them. And so I'll talk about it real quick, because in the very beginning you know nothing about tech, and then you start to learn tech, and then you get opinions, and then you're like, oh, this thing has to be like, I have to, instead of using like a pre-made solution like a Google form, I'm going to go create my own form. And
Right.
so we often engineer or over engineer things, right? And you also have to learn how to step back and just do the simple thing. Rubber Duck's a good example of this. Rubber Duck, like its backend runs on a flat file,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what it is. It's like, here's a flat file that does the job for now, and if it gets enough traction, then we pivot, right? Because spinning up a database isn't really worth the effort at this point in time. But I really like that you called that out. When you're building something early, you just want to be like gritty and don't over engineer, don't do too much stuff. Um, and I know I've fallen into that category before, because there's times where I will be like, oh, there's this thing, I'm gonna go build my own version. And I'll go
Yeah.
build my own version, and then halfway through I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. I'm wasting all this time. And so you definitely learn about all these things over time. And these are some of the things that we're looking to share. But here's what you talked about, like skill erosion. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
skill erosion is absolutely a real thing. It's funny, you could have like worked in like JavaScript, let's just say, or Python for 10 years, and then you kind of go and you start to go into business side, or do other work, and you're like, oh, there's this amazing engineer that does all this stuff, but then you go to them, right, and they have been out of it for so long, and that's, their skills have eroded because maybe they haven't had the time to work on them. And teaching helps to
Yeah.
keep your skills fresh, right? So whenever I teach, it gives me an opportunity to go back and relearn those things. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons that I'm also excited about like doing the stuff that we have planned, is because not only can I help somebody, close some gaps, to, connect the dots, I also get to go back and relearn how to do this thing that I maybe haven't done for 5 years. So I can
Right.
go back, relearn it. Like, okay, I really do know this thing. It makes me sharper. Um, and again, I hope to stave off some of that erosion, because the truth is, there comes a time where everybody moves out of development, out of active development, or whatever the skill is that you're actively doing. It doesn't have to be software; it could be something else. Like maybe you were a chef in the kitchen, and you were a chef for 20 years, and you had these skills, and then you weren't cooking for so long. You're gonna forget how to do certain things,
Yeah.
like how
Yeah.
to
I mean,
do
that's just
them
it. Yeah.
exactly. Right? It's just it. So you want to find ways, right? You have to be creative, and you have to find ways to practice them. And well, for us, it's pretty easy. Hey, I'm going to go teach a workshop on X, and that's
Yeah.
going to force me to go back and learn that thing. Um, and then teaching it, right? Because there's that whole thing, right? Was it like learn one, do one, teach one, something like that? I can't remember how it exactly how it goes, but it absolutely works. Is that you learn it, or you watch it, you learn it, and then you teach something like that. I'm butchering it,
I
but
don't remember the phrase. Like, I mean, this is a great example, right? Like we'll just take this opportunity where we can't remember a phrase to demonstrate skill erosion. I was a teacher for 5 years, and I would know exactly the phrase that you're talking about. I don't remember the phrase. Um, and like,
yeah,
like, um, and like these days, like the phrasing that I think about is like teach yourself, teach someone else, teach a computer. But that's a scaling model, not a learning model or even a skill model. That's a scaling model, is right. Like I learn it myself. That's like the gritty, like fast pace. I teach someone else. That's the scaling an organization. And then I teach a computer. That's when I'm automating something. And like, but that's not the phrase that you're talking about. I love this as an example because it is so indicative of skill erosion. I was a school teacher for 5 years, and like, I don't know, there's so many things that hammer into that. Like, we were both in the service. I'm sure that there are tons of things just related to being in the service that you nor I can do anymore, that
right.
we did every day for years. Like, I know that. Like, I could probably, like, I mean, if I just thought about the things I did, I was a chemist, there's tons of like medical chemistry that I probably do not know how to do. Like, if you gave me a slide to read today, I mean, I'm sure I could count the cells on it, but I might not be as good at some of those more edgy like behaviors of like identifying sickness as I was back then. Um,
Well, the important question is, do you still make your bed the same way?
oh, you know what? Like, I mean, I don't actually make my bed. My wife
Yeah, me
does.
neither.
It's like, but like, I don't like, I'm like, but, um, with those slanted corners, like, no, I don't do that anymore. There were some things that I quickly jettisoned and thought, this isn't a skill that I want to erode when I left the military, and making my bed was like with that pristine 45-degree angle was probably one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, I mean, I think that's maybe the thing that really drives this home is like being intentional about what skills you let erode. There's this really great video that I recommend a lot by a guy named Joel Khalifa called Full Stack Anxiety. And like, that title is maybe a misnomer, especially when you start to watch the video at first, because it feels like what he is he's Joel Khalifa is a full stack designer, which means he has like the design glass experience with some JavaScript and HTML experience. We're talking about a world like sort of pre-React here, when there was such a strong split between front end design and front end development. But anyways, this video is really all about him kind of like trying to project his career and pick the skills to work on. Right. I love this video because it really hones in on like tech is a big industry. There's a lot of things to work on. But like, at its core, what's really important is that we don't let the skills erode that we consider assets to us. And like, I would say that that's something that I'm saying this as something that I'm at fault for, because the early experience in Forge has really demonstrated to me that feature delivery is a skill I have let erode. And I want to reiterate that that's not something that you have to do at your job. You don't have to like, well, let me go get on a feature development team. I'm not about to go and find a job where I'm working product development because I know it made me miserable.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. And I think that's the value of parallel development. That's the value of like you working in a community. You've started this amazingly average community. I'm really excited to see where that goes. Like, I'm there as a participant and excited to see what other people are building. And of course, like just creating opportunities to build failed startups.